and this would be the steam engine, and this would be the power supply that would make the Industrial Revolution boom. This would make Britain, this would make other countries in Europe that got going with the Industrial Revolution a little bit later, like Belgium, and then soon to be Germany, and the United States, and give them a leg up on everybody else. And this piston design here, still using an internal combustion engine today. And it's a brilliant design. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple once you see it, but to make the component, especially to give an airtight cylinder. And the whole idea of this is you have this piston powered here where it drops down, and then this is a heating supply, shoot steam in it, shoots that piston up. But then how do you get it back down? That's the problem. Shot a little jet of cold water in there that cooled it down instantly. If you have it tight, so it's a vacuum, what does it do? Sucks it down. You put steam in there. And that keeps it efficient. And that will change the world. It's actually just a remarkable design. This is actually one of Watt's steam engine in this museum in London. And use that to turn a wheel, and then you have from trains to the power supply of factories. Watt's engine changed everything. Internal combustion engine uses a very similar idea to this. And even this cool little car in a little museum in Yorkshire. That blew up, I guess, all the time. It was hard to keep this, all the pressure from the steam, and it was hard to make these seals tight, so either they'd leak or some might just go boom. Steam engines could be very dangerous. Some of the most spectacular accidents in history would be steamboats. But once you have, or a country has, society has the consistent power supply, that is going to fuel innovation. All these new products will come about because there's a use for it, there's a way to power it. Before there was a power supply, before there was a need for it, why would you innovate things like this? It's not that people were dumb all of a sudden in 1793, it's like eureka. It just didn't make sense unless you had a power supply and some way to use it. For example, Eli Whitney would also innovate this. He didn't invent it, but he's the first one to market it. What's that? The cotton gin. All gin or G-I-N, that's just like it. All it needs is a machine. That's all it needs. Gin's a machine to make something. And what? Yeah, actually there'd be a big gin crisis in England. I think I mentioned that before. But it's also a machine. And this, what does it do? So it spins on these whirling burrs, basically like steel brushes, and it rips the hard, cotton came in a hard steel, wow, a hard shell, and by hand you'd have to rip that apart and pull out a little bit of fluff. It's too expensive, too labor intensive to make any money off that. But all of a sudden now, this will give you a cotton kind of puff, coarse fibers. But then again, great, now I have coarse fibers. Yay! What do you need? The textile industry and the Industrial Revolution to get the demand for this. This makes no sense unless you have someone there to buy up all that cotton. So you're exactly right. The Industrial Revolution gave the demand. What did Morse invent? The telegraph, but he invented the code because that's the only way to use it. And all the telegraph would do was send a little jolt of electricity down here, a little battery. Back this way, you turn a little crank and make a little, basically like static electricity. It held these little charges here, not for long. And if you push that button down, all you push it down is it connects the power source to a little bit of to a wire, and that sends just an electrical current down the line. Yeah.
What was his first name?
Samuel. And since all you do is send like a little bit of electricity, which if you hook an earphone to it, you hear just a tiny bit of static. You got to come up with Morse code. Short bits of static, longer bits of static. Who knows Morse code? I want to SOS. Yeah, you know SOS. Good for you. Why did they come up with SOS? SOS is meaningless. Means nothing. Yeah, and to make it out, dot, 3 quick dots, 3 long, 3 quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a sec too. And think about what this would do. All of a sudden now, think about this new industrial system, a new industrial society, where you want to know the prices of raw materials, or the price you can charge in production, how long that will take that information. Now all of a sudden, boom, instantaneous information. You get it right now. But not only news and laws that have such great effect on business, boom, you get it now. But something else is as important. So if you want to be where all the banks are and run your business, now with the telegraph, you can be in New York City and run your steel mill in Syracuse or in Pittsburgh or wherever. So this allows for companies to get bigger. You don't have to be right there at production. You can have somebody else do it and you can worry about the finance. This is going to be a revolutionary shift. It was at first about 10 and soon every 30 miles, which is the exact distance you needed for a train. You can refuel, so every 30 miles, we have a telegraph station and a train. And somebody 24 hours a day. Well into near the end of the 19th century, after you sit there at those telegraph stations, little headphones on, listening for some kind of code to come through saying the message is coming. Then you write it down, and you set it down the line 30 miles. So you ever play that game? I think telephone. When I was a kid, we still called it telegraph, where you whisper something and go around a room. You ever play that? And it's always messed up. Like, it comes from real life experience. So next, Elias Howe. What did he invent? And I love this sewing machine because this is the hand crank one. So you turn it. But you imagine you replace that with a belt, and therefore you put it in a factory powered by steam.
The one was like a little bit newer than that one. Like it's still old, but like it's newer than that.
Mm-hmm.
For Fiddler on the Roof is November 9th and 10th and 11th here.
Oh, so you have it here at the. Is it a foot pedal one? Because I've seen the foot pedal. Oh, okay.
Because a lot of them are foot pedals.
And that actually makes more sense because you have your hand in the way. Yeah. Sewing machine. And what's amazing about this time, so many of the innovations at the beginning of the first and then the second industrial revolution, which is more electricity, we still basically use all those innovations today. The actual sewing machine, the way it sews, is no different than what Elias Howe made. It's just improvements on power, some better steel instead of iron, which is really cumbersome. And well over 90% of what we use technologically today is either the same innovation or just improvements on innovation from the 19th century. And so people talk about the wave of change today. Yeah, it's big, but it's on the periphery of what really gets us through life. And if you don't believe me, take away the piston engine and the electricity, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's still a big deal. Did you have a question? Just ready to write. And let me give you two more that would deal with
Wow.
John Deere would invent what? I knew somebody every period says the tractor. No. Yeah. Steel tip plow. Steel tip plow doesn't go dull. It can go through the hard soil of the Midwest and the plains. That is the first one at the Smithsonian Museum. But this is one, the more practical one, be pulled by horses, a team of horses, and you sit there, there's a plow, the sheep to clean off the plow. If you plow faster, one worker can do more work. But McCormick would come up with even a more important, and not maybe, important's not the right word, but more labor-saving device. Do you know what that is?
No. It's a harvester.
It's called the reaper. So instead of doing it by hand with a scythe, and then you take the wheat and you have to beat it against a rock or something, shake it to get the seeds off, this does everything. The first reaper did the work of 10, eventually 20, then 30 people. Yeah. Cyrus McCormick. Thankfully, no one said spice in here. He invented spice. No, different McCormick. And McCormick didn't invent spice. But today, a combine does this, same thing. It's the same exact idea. This cuts it, And then it goes in this spins, and it gets caught up on those bars and rots the wheat right off, and comes right the corn, the little the seed just goes into the bottom. And, is this good or bad for farmers?
It's good because they have a larger farm,
Yes.
therefore it's bad for the workers.
Yes.
Think about what this is going to change. Everything. 160 acres. That's a heck of a lot for one family to do. Now,
That's nothing.
yeah, it's nothing. And now you have to go into debt to buy this thing. Ain't cheap.
But then you can speak on it.
Do you get more land? You have to go into debt to get the land? All it takes is one bad year. You see the problem? One bad year, is it good or bad?
Yes.
Yes is a good answer. And another thing, too, think about families. You have to have a lot of kids because you need all these workers. Now, all of a sudden, do you need as many workers? Yes. Think about what the Industrial Revolution is going to do to the size of families. Before, kids are great because you got little slave laborers. That'd be a great thing if someone walking down and not get the context of that one. But now with the Industrial Revolution, now you don't need the slave laborers, and now you got to feed the little urchins. Think about that for a second. Huh? Do I? But you're small. I teach all of you on my show. Okay, with that, you're my family, and thankfully you leave in every 50 minutes. Okay, so with that,
Wait, if we're slave laborers, what do we do?
huh?
Yeah.
That's why we have the
Right.
bribes and surrounding me in case of assassin. So, A, why did the United States? Why were we so unique? Why did we have this? More and more, why do they, in Britain, they call it the American System of Labor for Interchangeable Parts. I'll explain clay later, so don't worry about clay. But why do we have this? Why did the United States did the factory system take hold? Not overnight, it's going to take a very long time, but why here? Why not China? Why not India? Why not Russia? It would take hold for similar reasons in Britain, but a lot slower in France. Happened in Belgium, but not Italy. So why here? And I put down this iron boat because that was such a symbol of it. You efficient iron boat, iron-hulled ships that could haul more, a lot more durable. I know it's so weird to think about iron. You think about you drop iron in water, it sinks, but I guess not. So there are 4 big reasons. The first one, demand. The United States had more demand for these goods. They were ready to buy it, and a larger, then they call it the middling, what we say is middle class. And I know I said this once before, but just to be clear about this. The middle class does not mean the median. It is the class between the upper and lower, or working class. The upper class are people who can afford all the trappings of an upper class life and don't necessarily have to work. They get the house, the mansion, porcelain. So much porcelain came from China, they called it China. All of that, silk, rugs, a big symbol of wealth, a sign of wealth in the first half of the 19th century was having a servant. If you had a servant every day or someone living in there, that was wow. And upper class, you didn't necessarily have to work. And then lower or working class people, virtually every penny they have goes towards what?
Yeah.
Right, that funnel up there. But the big thing is survival. You just have enough to live. Middle class is different. They have to work. They have to do some kind of middle class occupation, which are more with this new industrial system, but at the same time, they can afford some of the trappings. They might have a little bigger house. They might have some of that porcelain. They might have a maid or a servant come in once a week or even once a day. That was a real big sign. Today it would be such things, house, car, certain, consumer items, vacations, being able to send your children to college, all those without a significant amount of debt. And that's the key issue. And yeah, debt, how much, because you have to pay it back, that's a really big drag potential on your future income. Might be worth it, but you have to pay it back. I know, isn't that disappointing? You got to pay back that. I knew a girl in college, and I know they had colleges then, but they had one of those things where they came around to get people to get credit cards, and they just prey on college students. You know, because they have college students and older high school students. Have you even got a credit card application here? You will, because they figure you do dumb things and have to pay interest. And I remember I didn't really know. She got a credit card. I didn't even know she got a credit card. But she was buying all this stuff, clothes and everything. And I said, you know, you got to pay that back, you know. And I remember she said, no, you get your first $1,500 free, and then you have to pay it back.
What? That's the same thing.
She thought her limit was free money. So moving on. That's a bad. You know what I mean by limit? They say you can't. And times were different too, but they also had low limit for a college student. Wonder what happened there. Shortage of labor. That's actually really sad. She spent like $1,200.
Oh my God.
And that was 1921. That was a lot of money. We didn't have credit cards. We were so far ahead in Montana. Shortage of labor. The thing about shortage of labor, this is twofold. First off, if there's a shortage of labor, not as many people complain about machines taking your jobs. There's not as many skilled craftsmen as, let's say, France, which had all these skilled workers and a system set up to protect them, and they were slow getting to the Industrial Revolution. U.S. didn't have that. So when machines took over these jobs, it wasn't as big an impact at first. And number two, if there's a shortage of labor, what does that do to wages? They have to be a little bit higher, and that increases demand because people buy more. And for almost everybody, especially in the bottom, about 90% of the wage earners, they spend almost everything they get. So additional money is spent. Capital. One of the most important capital sources or elements of capital is fuel. And the U.S. had an abundance of it. You know, think about it for a second. Fast-moving streams, vast forests. Yes, by 1900, the U.S. would cut down 97% of the forests in the continental United States by 1900. Pretty efficient, wasn't it? It's amazing they saved the 3%, isn't it? Yeah, if you go to like New England and see all these beautiful forests, virtually all of them have been planted 2 or 3 or 4 times. Wow. It rains a lot more than that. Yeah.
Is it capital, fuel a resource for capital?
See, capital, you can count it as that, but the big thing about capital is you need fuel to operate your machines, and since it's something that somebody could own the fuel, you could own that. And so, or be in partnership with somebody else. So you could own the coal mines that you use to fuel your steel mills. So then it's counted. Like that's what Carnegie did. It's not Carnegie, it's Carnegie. It's Carnegie. Actually, that's Carnegie. But what else do we have? Coal. Immense coal resources and immense oil fields. Immense oil fields. We should add one thing about oil, coal, all of this. Like everybody else, we will use it until it's gone. Because that's what humans have always done. And then we find something else. Well, we never needed fuel as much as we do since the Industrial Revolution, so we have no idea. We're going off into the darkness. Yeah. Well, I didn't mean it to sound like that, dark without fuel, but I mean it's darkness of not knowing because we have no real comparison. We just know what it should be. Yeah.
But aren't we on research? What I've heard is we're only now tapping like 10% of the oil reserves right now.
The problem with that is almost all the oil reserve is so hard to get up. Right. So expensive. All right, next, education. We are by far the most educated society. Ain't I telling the truth? And there is a question we must be asking: is our children being educated? And I would say yes. President Bush once asked that. Previous president, the president who was alive most of your early life, right? Yeah. Was anybody born and was after Clinton was president? January 20th, 2001? You're all So you didn't have Clinton as president. You just had Bush. And then Obama and Trump.
I was at Bush's.
I've had. You were at Bush's inauguration? How old were you? How old was it like? So
I remember it was golden.
the literacy rate, especially amongst men in the North, was over 90% by the Civil War. Actually, it was about 96%. Women, it was over 80%, which was unheard of. Heck, the North was incredibly literate. The South was running around 70% and about 50% for women, and I'm not counting slaves. The South, to this day, is significantly lower. Sorry, Alabama. And think about what an educated society does. It's not so much what you're learning in class, even though that is important. Hopefully you get the connections and understand more and want to learn more. But the big thing is you're being taught to think. You're being taught that you need to know, you have to have a background, you need to know things to critically think and to adapt to changing situations. I mean, the things you learn in here, in fact, any skills you have or any of the technology you have is pretty much irrelevant 15 years down the road. But what never changes is that ability to think, the ability to write, the ability to read, and the ability to concentrate, to focus. Those never change. And that's what you learn in school. That's what's important. So you get all these new technological changes that are happening then. And they're radically shifting everything, and people could adapt easier. That's a big, big factor. And part two is what I started the class with yesterday and ended it with. Education teaches you how to be compliant, obeying workers. You've been taught from day one to obey, to follow orders, to expect to follow orders, to believe this is natural, to believe this is the way that society functions. And it has always functioned that way. You've always been like this, right? Humans have always obeyed the clock and obeyed the bells and did what people told them, right? Well, the problem is, and this is a big problem, yes, we are consciously doing that, but what's happened, it's been going on so long that people think it's natural. And they forgot anymore that this whole thing was a massive manipulation. Actually, you never saw anybody care what time it was before 1830. No one gave a damn what time it was. You only care what time it was if you're trying to navigate the market. Right?
How did you learn to move out times?
Oh, I'm not saying this is a bad system. That's not the point. The point is it was set up on purpose, not because it's the best way to run school, but it's the best way to make good factory workers.
Would be best better.
See, I'm hard pressed to think of another way, partially because I have the ability to imagine even different. As my guess is all of you are in the same boat, right? Can you imagine anything different? I mean, we can imagine little things we could change in a class, little things we change, but we can't. I mean, that's like
Not having time.
Make it all online schooling and doing it whenever you want to.
yeah, and you would not learn anything.
Well, you could like instead of like having, they would have.
But the point is, historically, that gave the United States a big advantage, that education system. And so I put this up here because this shows the share. It says wealth share. It's an awkward way of putting it. But this is the percentage of wealth that the wealthiest 1% have in 3 countries, US, France, and the United Kingdom. And yeah, the 1% always had wealth. In fact, nearly 50% by 1900 of all the wealth went to the top 1%. But look how much higher it was in these other countries. That means the 99% of the remaining of the population, there's more wealth for them in the US than in the United Kingdom. And if there's more wealth spread amongst the population, that means there's more what? Exactly. And that, please get that down. All this led to more demand. All 3 increased demand dramatically. And the US had this advantage. One of the most remarkable things in my lifetime is how the shift has been made. Always it was the United States was always more open and much easier to go between classes, and that shifted in my lifetime. To where now, this in 2000 has almost doubled the amount of wealth by 2017. And they're almost at 50%. or almost at 40%, I'm sorry, of the wealth in the top 1% today. And that's going up exponentially now. I mean, literally exponentially. It's remarkable how fast the wealth is focusing on top. And the big thing is, if wealth focuses on top, that hits demand. Regardless, you talk about social, economic problems, that I'm just talking demand right here. Yeah.
So why did all the countries go down?
Here, conscious economic policy by the countries. They purposely set up their entire economic policy, from their government, their laws, from their tax code to how they set up to break up monopolies.
So why is it coming back up?
Because the United States consciously in the beginning in the late 70s, early 80s, consciously reversed that to put as much money in the hands of the wealthy. And it's worked incredibly well.
And it's probably never
We'll
going
get
to
to
go
it.
back. It'll probably never go back.
We might be witnessing that right now, but I mean, in maybe 5 or 6 years, not now. But we might be seeing the shift right now. We're in a really, this is big. I think you guys are at a big moment. It's going to be fun. You're going to ride the wave. Don't give me that look. So, no, this is conscious policy. So what we have now, a new economic system called capitalism, where capital is key. There was not capitalism before. Now, most people confuse capitalism with a market economy. This is not, there's been markets before, but never when machines were dominant. Who controls this? Now, we have to get one man's name, Adam Smith. Do not write down the whole title of his book. I love the title of his book, and titles of the book in the 18th century were quite long, have you noticed? But I love the theory of moral sentiments and the inquiry into the nature of causes of the wealth of nations. That's what you got to get. Everybody calls it the wealth of nations. I think I have a copy back there somewhere. I've read it a couple times. It's hard to read 7th or 18th century prose. It's really hard to read. When you got one sentence that's like a page and a half, it's just weird. It doesn't flow the way we're used to. This is before the term economics would be used. A lot of people have given him credit for capitalist theory, but he was actually talking about pre-capitalism, and he got his ideas from 2 Arab philosophers. But 1776 is when he wrote this. Anything else happened in 1776? I'm trying to remember. Wasn't there something important? What else happened?
Nothing.
And so, yeah, nothing to see here. It's kind of interesting, though. You have Thomas Jefferson, who took ideas of great philosophers to write the Declaration of Independence, and Adam Smith took the ideas of mostly Arab philosophers, trying to figure out the way that, why did some markets or some people in the markets do well? He took from those ideas and put it in something that people read. Where's he from? Scotland. He's from Edinburgh. There he is over there in the green frame, right through looking north. As Adam Smith always looked north. Look north, young man. Isn't that what he said? Or that just could have been where I put the poster. And Adam Smith, we got to get to what he said, because his economic theories, before the term economics was there. By the way, what does economics even mean?
The study of economics. Supply and when resources are scarce. That's
It's how to deal with scarce resources. How people deal with scarce resources. I know we can come up a little bit more to come later, but the whole thing is you have a limited amount of like food. Anything left in there? See, now you have even limited amount of food left. And economics is how people take food from other people. Science. And he's a philosopher, and he's looking at Britain. And what is that policy where Britain tried to control trade to maximize exports and minimize imports and get colonies? And he was looking at mercantilism and saying mercantilism is inefficient and flawed. And so what he did is, okay, let's look at the idealized economy, the idealized world. And idealized, and what people use all the time, Elvis. And when Elvis went to the army, everything changed. What happened? I tried to keep flowing like I meant to do it. I didn't mean to do it. So, he came up with this concept of a free market. Now, you notice I put the word free in quotes because never in the history of the world has there been a free market. There's always been controls, regulations, limits, laws for the supply of money to everything else. If you don't believe me, just imagine what a free market would be if there were no laws and limitations. It would be whoever had the gun controlled the market, AKA not free. And so, when he looked at this market, now before we get to anything, I'm talking about the market for one product. This is economics on a small scale or microeconomics. And so let's say the market of like selling just highlighter pens. Just selling highlighter pens. Or, yeah, the generic graph that has no application to real life.
Okay.
Don't tell Mr. Hab that. No, you tell me. You tell Mr. Hab he's making everything up.
Okay.
No, this is actually the idealized market supply and demand, which if you're an AP econ, you've seen 1,000 times. And it doesn't quite look like that, but yeah.
So you may know it's one of the widest quantity on the x-axis.
That I can't remember. I know I was told that many years ago.
Just a joke. Just cause.
Okay, so. I'm sending an email to somebody. So the first thing about the market was, his basic idea is that as awful as he thought this was, and as greedy and horrible as he thought this was, a society will function best if everybody operates in their own self-interest. Greed. If everybody operates in their own self-interest, looking out for themselves, then the society will function the best. And you think about it in the marketplace, the person selling the pens or the person buying the pen, selling your pen. If they're all operating in their own self-interest, and in an idealized world that makes sense. Now, of course, that never functions either. People can't operate in their own self-interest because they rarely know all the information. And secondly, self-interest only works if people act rationally. You have to come up with a choice. You think, okay, I'm going to make the exact right move. I don't know if you know this about people.
We don't.
We don't do that.
They are shockingly irrational. In fact, it's rare to find it when people are rational. And so they do things when they could be just to get rich quick, or I'm going to buy this because I need it, or make decisions because they don't like somebody and I'll show you and I'm going to steal yours. Yeah. Oh, well, then Tanner, then you become rational. But, so self-interest. But remember, this is the idealized market that has never existed. Next, the whole concept of self-interest works if there is competition. And the competition between different groups in society. So different people selling goods, different people buying goods, different people trying to use their labor for different means. We go through any number of things. But this competition of people acting in their own self-interest. And one thing we have to add, in this competition, what pushes it, propels it, makes for better products and better services is that risk. Risk. There's a chance you can lose. And so that's the incentive. There's a risk, but a reward. And not the game. You might lose everything, too. And the thing about the marketplace is, you have to understand this one thing. Everybody who enters a market to sell a good, or even to buy a good, they want to get rid of one big thing. This. The risk. The risk, if they get rid of the risk, then they can just do whatever they want, right? But there's no risk if there's no competition, so they want to get rid of the competition. And if you want to get rid of the competition, you no longer have a market. And that's what everybody wants, something like a monopoly or a full monopoly. And has anyone ever played the game Monopoly?
Yes.
Two things about it. First off, almost every game I played devolves into a fist fight.
Yes.
And have you noticed only one company sells the game Monopoly? Think about it. So with that, so what the market is the interaction of supply and demand. And supply is not just the, when I mean supply, I'm not just the total number of, once again, yellow highlighters. It's also the different now businesses or people trying to sell these markers. And demand are the people buying it. And they're looking at something, a product. This is supply, the product we need. But let me show you this real quick. First off, this simple demand curve is like this. If the price is low, the suppliers won't produce very many. Not many people will come to the market. As price goes up, more suppliers. Same thing with the price. I'm sorry, with demand. If the price is high, yeah, people won't buy as much. When the price drops, people buy more. And so somewhere is an equilibrium. And no, it isn't like all of a sudden they hit the number where there's the exact number of people selling it and the exact price, and like all of a sudden horns go off and flags fall and we all have won. But this, he dubbed the invisible hand of the market. Why did he dub it the invisible hand? He's implying that it's some kind of natural force, like, gee, I wonder what Enlightenment philosopher really affected all their thinking. Or this force, who? Newton. Yeah, it's Newton. Gravity. It's like gravity, he said, of all things being perfect. The prices, they'll naturally find each other. Now, let's be clear about how often things have been perfect outside of this classroom. Never! Leave my presence. Tomorrow, after the assembly, I know you're going to be bubbling over with pep. I feel bad for you. You want to see a picture? I made the pilgrimage to Adam Smith's grave in Edinburgh. Well, there were, you know, they had mentioned it during second, I think, but he was going to do it sometime, and it wasn't forced, was it? I mean, I don't.
And then on Thursday, we're
That's gonna be chaos.
Yeah, that's awful.
But we're all gonna die anyway. Why don't you practice it?
Why is a long enough time span? Yeah.
And I'm gonna kill a bunch of kids. I'm gonna kill a bunch of kids. I'm not gonna come to the school and it's gonna be empty and just assume that no one's here.
Yeah, you know, if doors lock, it might deter, but you're right. Oh, you are reading it? Okay, good. Oh, yeah. Oh, and British currency, that was pre-decimal system. They did on the decimal system like 71. And so, yeah, it's like 15 shillings make a pound and 20 pence make a shilling.
It's very confusing. I'm debating sticking over, but I'm not going to push through. Because first it talks about like the division of labor, like no one's going to get to that and how that's important, and now it's on the currency. It's confusing.
It's really confusing, and the style of writing.
There's like injections of random phrases that I'm just it stops the sentence, and then there's a new sentence, and then the sentence later.
Without any grammatical rules, it's just chaos. Why don't we just read it for economics?
Just because I watch it. Because I heard my debut on economics degree and I'm reading it, so.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it's good, but it's. You can see why a lot of people never read it. You skipped yesterday. Where were you?
I was on my way home in North Dakota.
You went to North Dakota?
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell us I did a couple little things on the Lansdale, Texas UFO sighting, which is what a big deal that was. Stock cars and the ghost road.
I should present tomorrow. I'll present tomorrow with you.
Okay. And so that's what we did, and then we gave us crew to work on it. We're going to assign that, and tomorrow's good. Yep. That's it. Today we're going to do, I'm going to show you something on DB Cooper.
All right. Wait, Partridge, are we going to be presenting on Friday at all?
Did you end it on Friday?
Yeah, we have to go to Missouri. No. I'll be here for
Well, the thing about it is that Thursday, I'm not happy here. I'm not at Thursday. So if I'm not here on Thursday, well, if we present, we'll reach your present. Don't come to
yeah, I mean, I'll present whenever.
Ask them. Make this look hey, look. Here, I'll get this. This next to okay, we'll get them all. We'll get them all. Who's brave? Out of 10? What's that? What's that? Sure. All right, I have good news for everybody. Before we get to DB Cooper, let me show you something. This chart is kind of scary. So naturally, I want to scare you.